Tom Etel with Shot Cooley Erickson. A lot of people met Tom through associations at our meeting and organization. He's going to be presenting it in conjunction with low voltage contractors. Robert Horst. Hirsch. I knew I was going to screw that up. You know? I even asked prior to it.
Called everything from Hirsch to Horsch.
And these gentlemen are basically going to give us a fire alarm 101 basics, kind of walk us through fire alarm and fire detection systems. So I guess without holding the podium much longer, I'm going to turn it over to these two gentlemen.
Thanks, Phil. I approached Phil about a year ago, trying to, I guess, interject a little bit more fire alarm information into these meetings. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And those of you who were at the last meeting saw that I still was struggling with what I wanted to do it and how I wanted to do it. But after the meeting, a couple of people came up to me and asked if one of the things that we could cover in this meeting would be just a real brief overview of fire alarm. And I know that a lot of you on this side of the room are involved with the sprinkler industry. And those of us on the fire alarm side sometimes there's a mystery, you know, or not a clear understanding of what happens. And the two systems do two different things. And what I want to do this evening is to take about 20 minutes and just go through Fire Alarm 101. It's going to be real brief. It's just going to explain what a fire alarm system is, some of the components that make it up, and what we're trying to do with the system, what it's trying to accomplish. Because sometimes it's a mystery, and if you don't really know it, even for those of us who have been in it for a long time, it still challenges a lot. So I want to take about 15-20 minutes and cover that. The second 20 minutes is I want to show you a videotape that I picked up at NFPA 2 years ago in Cincinnati, and it's produced by the Phoenix Fire Department. And it was produced, I guess, to address the understanding and the response of the fire crews as they respond to a building that has a fire alarm in it, and some of the difficulties that they have in trying to understand what that fire alarm system is telling them. Because that's one of the functions that a fire alarm system does, and I'll go through the slides in a minute, is you're supposed to tell and notify and explain where that alarm is coming from. And it may sound simple, but some of these buildings, as they get more complex, as this equipment gets more complex, it gets harder to explain to firefighters who are working on a different routine than what a technician or a fire alarm designer may be working at, to explain what that alarm is actually doing. So that's the second thing. And the third segment is I've invited Bob Hirsch to attend the meeting this evening, and he's going to explain what we're trying to set up in the Twin Cities initially is a Minnesota chapter of AFAA, which is the Automatic Fire Alarm Association. And it's a group of people that specifically work in the fire alarm world, designers, installers, and we don't have a chapter in Minnesota, and we think there's a need to have one to just explain to this industry changes, training, and code updates, and just explain specifically to those people what's going on in the fire alarm industry. So that's going to be the third segment. But first, let me go through the slides. Sprinkler systems, as a lot of you know, are in a building to, number one, detect a fire and extinguish or control that fire. That's the purpose of a sprinkler system. A fire alarm system does these items. This is why a fire alarm system is in a building. One is to detect a fire in its early stages. The second thing that it does is notify occupants of an emergency. And these are also listed in the order of importance of the fire alarm system. One is you need to detect it. Two is you need to notify. Those are the two major components. Three is you need to notify the fire services. And this is when the building's on fire, you're notifying the people to either relocate to a different part of the building, or evacuate the building. Thirdly, you need to notify the fire services that they need to respond to get to that building. The fourth is enunciate the location of the fire. That's what I was talking about earlier. Sounds simple, and if you'll view the tape, you'll see that it gets a little bit complicated. But you need to tell someone, as they respond to the building, when they get to the building, where that fire is. And then lastly, you need to initiate some type of a smoke management procedure. That could be a passive or a mechanical smoke control system, so that you contain the smoke, so that you can get the people out of the building before you're responding to this. The devices that make up that first step, which is notify a fire alarm condition in the building, are done through a number of different ways. With smoke detectors, heat detectors, a water flow switch. These are all automatic initiating devices that make up a fire alarm system. The building codes dictate to a designer which devices are actually put in a building that make up the fire alarm system. It's not just going through a list and saying, we're going to put this, we're going to put in. You go to the building codes. The building codes tell you that if you have like an E occupancy, you need to put smoke detectors in different types of rooms. That's how smoke detectors get into a building. If you have elevator recall, then you look at the elevator codes, it tells you to have a smoke detector in the lobbies, it tells you to put it in the machine room for recall operation. That's how smoke detectors for elevators get inside the building. But those are all devices that are automatic initiating devices that are connected to a fire alarm system. Sprinkler systems, you've got a fixed temperature heat detector. Basically, those devices, that's greater than 20 heads, need to be connected and sent out and monitored. So again, those are all automatic devices. We also have manual initiating devices. Those manual devices primarily are these manual pull stations that you see sitting by doors. So you've got manual devices, and you've got automatic devices that are initiating devices for a fire alarm system. An example of a manual pull station, and a lot of you have seen these devices, and that's a smoke detector. There's different types of smoke detectors. There's a photoelectric primarily, and there's an ionization. The technology is changing now where some companies are putting photoelectrics and ionization technologies in the same unit. Because a photoelectric will detect a different type of a fire than an ionization smoke. So that's photo, here's an ionization, and I won't go through all the electronics of how these things work, but it's just, there to just show you there's different types of smoke detectors. You have heat detectors, which is basically a thermal link inside a head. Material expands, makes a contact with the switch. And then there's a sprinkler, which all of us are familiar with. Now those devices, as we wire them through the building, need to be connected up and monitored by a fire alarm panel. What makes a fire alarm system unique is that the wires that are connected up to these smoke detectors or heat detectors are supervised. So that if the wires are cut, that fire alarm panel will know it. And that's what makes a fire alarm system unique and different from other systems, is that the wiring is supervised. And it's supervised through a 2-wire or a 4-wire circuit. And this is an older configuration too, so hold on guys. But you've got a heat detector and a smoke detector and a water flow switch and a tamper switch. All of those are grouped together, wired together. And this is commonly what's called a fire alarm zone. A lot of times you walk in a building and somebody will say, I've got an 8-zone panel or a 2-zone panel. That's the number of these circuits that are connected to a fire alarm. Similar to a sprinkler zone. That's what a fire alarm zone consists of. And then after the fire alarm system detects a fire, there's an alarm into the panel. Then you have bells or horns or lights that are also off that fire alarm system that are required to go off. That's that second step that we were talking about, where we have to notify the occupants of a building if we are inside the building. All this is wired down to a fire alarm control panel. And that's an example of one. They come in different shapes, sizes, colors, everything else, but that's just an example of a fire hydrant. The systems now have displays, and when you have an alarm come up on a panel now, a lot of the systems are addressable or analog or intelligent, where these smoke detectors will go off, and instead of that zone configuration, they'll tell you exactly what room went off, which elevator lobby that smoke detector went off, and it's displayed on the screen, either an LED or an LCD screen, so that the owner can tell where that alarm is coming from. Sprinklers are specifically suited for one job, fire alarm systems are suited for another job. I talked about that earlier. They do two separate things. Sprinkler systems are there for property protection. Their second function is life safety. Fire alarm systems are there primarily for life safety, get the occupants out of the building, notify them, get them out, and then get enrolled in your responding crews in the building. Secondly is property protection. Two different functions. It's been proven far too many times that thermally operated devices such as sprinkler struts, heat detectors operate too slowly to be considered reliable life safety protection. Compared to sprinklers, the lead time or rescue potential of early warning fire detection is unquestionable. That's the need, that's why smoke detectors are primarily used on fire alarm systems, because they do provide that early warning response time that a heat detector will not give you. Hazardous levels of smoke, heat, or carbon monoxide gas can develop and seriously impede a safe escape before a heat detector alarm goes off. Hazardous conditions of smoke and gases will develop before a heat detector activates. And to the extent that heat detectors are purchased in lieu of smoke detectors, some threat to life safety may be posed. And that's pretty much dictated by the codes now where they require smoke detectors. Experts say fire deaths and detector-equipped 1- and 2-family houses are about half those non-detector dwellings. And again, the use of smoke detectors in residential occupancies dictates and specifies themselves in construction. Experience and testing now show that a far more effective step would be to install automatic sprinklers and smoke detectors in all buildings and residences. The Chicago Fire Consultant estimates that those combined fire protection systems will reduce injuries, loss of life, and property damage by at least 50%. So we're not advocating one over the other. These two systems work together. And that's, I guess, the future of the codes right now is to have a well-designed fire protection design inside the building, which includes a well-designed fire protection sprinkler system and fire alarm. The only practical solution to the fire death and property loss problem in the United States is the combined use of early warning and detection devices to allow people time to escape from a fire and suppression systems to put the fire out while it is still small. The best way to reduce fire loss or loss of life due to fires is in building codes and fire ordinances, built-in fire extinguishing systems, and built-in early warning detection systems. They can do a better job than any firefighter. Firefighters all agree that automatic sprinkler systems are one of the most effective means of extinguishing fires early. Together with early warning systems, they provide the most effective life safety measure in the event of fire. So in summary, the fire alarm systems function primarily as a life safety system, and secondarily as property protection systems. Sprinkler systems function primarily as property protection systems, secondarily as life safety systems. Anything less than a balanced system, including early warning fire alarm and sprinklers, is a serious compromise in efforts to reduce the loss of life and property damage. That's my fire. Questions? Kind of quick, just 101, just to kind of give you an idea of, what makes up the fire alarm system.
In the newer addressable systems, they're still loops. Each one is its own. Each addressable thing is its own, right?
It really isn't dictated by the wiring anymore, like the old hardwired systems. That would physically dictate what a zone is. in a new addressable system or the intelligent systems, it's not dictated by the wiring, because then you can get into the software and describe where those devices are. So it's just more a matter of convenience of getting those wires over. But we've had projects where they've crisscrossed across each other once in a while, but the two of the adjacent detectors are really programmed in the same room. Doesn't happen often.
Looking at the fire alarm, looking at the code standard. I was in a motel down in Otter Falls last week. They had a new system in down there and smoke detectors, fire alarm. It stormed that night. The system went off twice. First time it rang for about 5, 7, 8 minutes because the lady didn't know how to turn it off. But at no time was there any other warning, there was no voice announcement, nor was there any response from the fire department. Are these different codes? I'm really not quite sure what the function of that system is supposed to be,
Yeah.
except to wake you up.
Well, and actually you've hit on probably the biggest problem that the fire alarm industry has had in the last 15 years, and that is false alarms. Those detectors and those earlier generations of smoke detectors.
It's a new system.
Yeah, and again, yeah, right. But and what the industry has done since then, because they've been going off falsely, and there's a number of reasons why that happens. A lot of it is installation. A lot of it is smoke detectors that I've gone in, and they've been installed right next to a supply diffuser, right next to it, the next ceiling tile over. So that supply diffuser just, as it's blowing air into the room, it's blowing dirt and particles and whatnot past that head, and it's just a matter of time before it goes off. And a number of different reasons, but installation is a big one. Testing, maintenance, and all those things add into to the false alarm problem for the fire alarm industry. And they're trying to reduce it. Because the worst thing the biggest thing that's killing the fire alarm industry is that the system goes off and nobody moves. There's a test been done, and they've actually videotaped what happens to occupants of the building when the fire alarm system goes off. And people just look around at it. They don't move. And they wait for the next person to verify, or they wait for a few minutes for someone to actually come into the room and say, hey, we should do something. That's not the purpose of that fire alarm system. It's something that our industry is trying to attack and make better. We've had instances where in a hotel or a motel, back in the old days, quote unquote, you'd have an alarm come down to the front desk, and the desk clerk was able to silence that alarm right at that desk right there. Just to keep it quiet, yeah. So they just silence it. They just keep silencing it. And there's been cases where there was a fire inside that building, and it was going upstairs, but they just kept silencing it. Yeah. So that we can't do that anymore at the front desk, even though there's probably thousands of systems out there that still operate that way. You can't have that function at the front desk. But I wish I could give you an answer as to why all of that happens, because it does. Unfortunately, it still does. And there's testing, there's installation, there's maintenance, there's design. Some of these systems are just poorly designed. We're putting equipment where it shouldn't be. I've had AHJs in a plan review for a project come in. And there's a part of the building where he's not able to get a response crew to. There's the path to the building for him to roll his trucks in is narrow, because the architect wants to put another building right next to that road right there. So I had an AHJ come in and ask me to take that half of the building, that half of the tower, and put spot detectors from the level 1 up to level 12, complete. Just put smoke detectors in there. And what you've done by that is you left all of those smoke detectors behind for the building owner that he has to maintain. And if he doesn't, his chances of having false alarms inside that building just skyrocket. So there's a lot of field bits that we still do. Let's just throw smoke detectors in, and we're thinking we're providing extra protection to the building, and we're not. The design is poor. We put detectors in just because someone doesn't know any better. They put a detector in there, and it may be the building that you're sleeping in, and it goes up. It may be installed poorly, and it may go up. It may not be tested on a regular basis. It has to be checked every year. Maintenance contracts aren't renewed, it doesn't hit. So there's just a whole litany of things that affect that work market. Wish I could give you better answer. That's,
Just wondering if you had a comment.
yeah, that's a big buck. Yeah.
The other thing, as far as like those hotels and motels, I used to handle territory in Sioux Falls and that, and a lot of the smaller, you know, like Fairfield Inn or Super 8 or one of those types of hotels, they will have that fire alarm panel right behind the front desk, like Tom said, and they will, many times those are not monitored off-site by a central station. So depending on, Tom mentioned, the authorities having jurisdiction, or the local fire marshal may not dictate that they have that monitored off-site. So, I guess in that instance is that their day people, night people, anyone that's working at the front desk needs to be trained on what to do with procedures. That's what it sounds like.
You know, it's funny, because I asked the lady the next morning, if you had a fire, what would you do? This motel has about 60 rooms on it, and 2 floors. Well, her instructions were to run down and knock on all the doors. That's the instructions that she was given. I said, what do you do if there's smoke in the hall? Well, the instructions say to run down the hall and knock on the doors.
Hold your breath.
Yeah, you have those problems.
And unfortunately, the fire alarm system is different than the sprinkler system. The sprinkler system goes off and water is flowing. 9 times out of 10, you've got a situation that warrants response. Unfortunately, our industry is still getting beat up a bit, and we're trying to improve it. This DFAA, which Bob is going to talk about, is an education process. We're trying to instruct the technicians, instruct the designers. The companies are trying to come out with better designed equipment. So all of that is being plowed into this improved fire alarm science. I'm going to show you tape now. This is, again, this is produced by the Phoenix Fire Department. And it addresses a lot of the response considerations. That plug is over there.
Plug completely out there.
Everybody hear it okay?
Standardized as far as taking control of the elevators, the lobbies, making sure the systems are working the way they should. Developing a plan of attack, and all of that is really centers around and just contingent on how those systems are working. But really in my mind, as far as command officer, if you look at some of the high-rises fires that we have had around the country and locally and really actually worldwide, is that typically there's a lot of systems failures. So as far as our plan is concerned, my personal plan is I try to anticipate the worst and then just kind of build on it from there. I just anticipate that those things are going to break or not be working right, and then kind of operate from that. And then anything else we get from there is a bonus. Well, I think from the firefighter standpoint, and all the way up to through the captain and a fire ground commander, in my career, one of the things that I've seen the most in downtown Phoenix, and I've always looked in other cities that I've got to, is that there needs to be some more things that are standardized. And not being a real code person myself, I don't know how exactly you structure that, but if there were some things that was pretty much, I mean, every time we get a new building or a retrofit on a building, we may get a smoke removal system, or we may get a sprinkler system, whether it's new or being retrofit or whatever, but they're not always standardized. The pumps aren't the same, how they're plumbed, how they're hooked up. And really, I think from an effectiveness standpoint is that they make it tough on us. The building engineers, the architects, all those other people, they make it difficult on us to fight fires in buildings that are inherently tough to begin with. Even if you have this system, the most advanced systems, if you end up getting a fire in those buildings, they're going to be very tough. So the things that they can do that would make it a more standardized approach to fire protection systems, panels, elevators, smoke systems, pumps, everything, rather than what we currently have, which is just a variety of things in the buildings that we see.
You know, in concept, I think they're great, and actually been on a couple of incidences where they're working and they're really good. The concepts are good, but with that, there's some inherent problems with the systems that really turn into nightmares and cause us, at least from my personal point of view, it causes us to be a little slower, and then we're playing a game of, are the systems working that we're looking at, or are they not? And that becomes a problem. And then, until we can determine that this is working, it kind of changes our plans and what we're doing. That, in my opinion, is probably the number one goal that we should be looking at. Not just the systems being standardized but up and working, but being in a thing where firemen, we're not architects, that we can go in and understand it. And I think one of the biggest things is like an alarm panel. I've been in several of our first two buildings, and the alarm panels are completely different with each building. Sometimes they're so complicated that we're trying to read computer printouts, and I can't even associate, once I'm in the fire control room, what zone is where, and it's giving out zone 3B, 4A, and I'm not even certain where that is. Where the more simplified it is for firemen, the easier it is for us to get an idea where it is. In other words, if we have an alarm panel that shows 1 through 24 vertically on the panel, and then I can pick, I know which floor it is, and then I can start looking for where on that floor it might be. But, you know, running into that kind of a panel is far and few between. They're usually all different. That along with, you know, the fire pumps and all the other systems, but those things are absolutely critical in the way we're going to develop our plan and the reports we're going to get as to where it is. So if we're spending time in front of a panel trying to decipher, and if we're spending time trying to figure out if a fire pump is running or not running, or if smoke injection is working in a stairwell, that's taking time. I think those systems are critical to have, but it would be nice if we can ascertain very quickly and in a standardized mode with each building. This is the same panel. Now we know what we have, and we're seeing if they are or aren't working. At least we have a pretty good idea. When we get into a fire control room and it starts spitting out B2, Zone 4, 5A, System 6, you know, our adrenaline's rushing. The excitement's there. We possibly have a working fire up above. And to ask a firefighter to sit there and try to decipher or reference it back to a control manual and go back and forth is just, it's ridiculous to try to do, particularly for first-in crews. First into the building, first to the building. We're thinking of a million other things, and the last thing we want to see is Zone 2 where we're trying to reference. Even if the book is right there and the manual's right there, and we've got to do some reading, we're just geared to do some other types of things rather than try to decipher where this is at. Absolutely, I've got into buildings where I've literally spent 5 minutes trying to figure out which panel is the alarm panel, because there are, you know, annunciator panels, and then there's some little fancy systems out there that have all kinds of different abilities and capabilities, and I'm still looking for just the alarm panel amongst all of these panels, and we've got lights flashing on all kinds, and I've got to start reading titles at each one, at the tops of each panel. That's taking time, and I'm not sure where it's located and what it is. That takes time, and once we get that, then we still have to address our plan and what we're going to do. I absolutely believe, without a doubt, that the major concerning part of a high-rise fire right now, at least the part that I'm concerned most about, is the non-standardization of the systems. And knowing that I'm going to spend some time looking for where the panels are, where the control room is, and what indications I'm getting, that's the biggest concern I have. And without a doubt, if we had a system in my predecessors, the captains that worked the high-rise district before I came, the ones that were really good were ones that spent most of their career in the high-rise corridor, and they had learned to memorize each building, or as many as they could. And those guys were considered the really good high-rise firefighting crews that knew their buildings. Well, that takes time to learn those buildings. They're constantly changing with remodels, or even the systems change as far as alarm panels or new pumps or whatever. Those are constantly changing. So now, the way I look at it is crews are so busy doing other programs, first aid calls and things. It's difficult to get out there year-round and continue to stay up on all of your high-rises and the new ones that are coming along. And it's very difficult to memorize each building. I think it would be a great, helpful part of the whole thing would be for a standard fire control room that had a standard panel and a standard alarm system, and as standard as we can make fire pumps and as standard as we can make smoke systems and things like that. I realize that there's construction constraints in that, but if nothing else, you had a standard room where a firefighter went in and at least recognized this room and knew where to look for certain things, and then had the same indicating panels that indicated the same thing in each building as far as what floor, and it was standardized that way. That would be the biggest helpful tool that the high-rise firefighting aspect could possibly get at this point. That's my opinion. Realistically, and you have to put yourself in the first due crew's shoes. Think about being at the station sometime at night or on a weekend, and an alarm comes in for a high-rise fire. You get to your truck, you're dressing out, in your turnout you're putting your bottle on, and all kinds of things are starting to run through your mind. You're thinking about life safety, and you're thinking about evacuation of people, and you're thinking about, I'm going into a unwelcome condition above ground somewhere. And this puts adrenaline in all these crews, and you're thinking all this, and when you get to a high-rise fire, your adrenaline level is at such a height that you want to perform and do something. And I think we fall back on what we were trained on as firefighters fighting fire. To simply ask somebody on a first duty crew to come in and sit down at a computer, dressed in full turnouts, thinking what he's thinking, that at some point in the next half hour he may be up above ground in smoke conditions with no lighting and heat and trying to find his way to a base. To ask that person to sit down at a computer and start interacting with the computer would be like asking a 3-year-old to sit down and play a serious game of chess. And it's ridiculous. The concept may be good, and that computer may get addressed later, second, third alarm, but I think it's not very conceivable for first arriving companies that need to evacuate getting into a computer interface.
You just described a real serious problem, again, with the alarm industry, with a lot of our designs. And we've all been guilty of it, because as I was describing and going through just a real basic fire alarm system, the technology is changing now. And the microprocessor chip changed our industry just hugely. And the advent of computer terminals and color graphic enunciation, and the ability to look at where all these devices are on a color graphic map, and have it flashing red, and zooming into different layers, and all of that. And that sounded great. It looks great in the marketing brochure. It demonstrates wonderfully at NFPA and all the booths. But he really describes something that's a big problem, and it's a big problem even here in the Twin Cities, because Minneapolis and St. Paul have addressed this problem in a lot of the high-rises already. And both plan reviewers have expressed a desire to have simplification when they respond to these fire command rooms that we're putting in a lot of these high-rises. And a lot of this doesn't just specifically relate to high-rises either. It can relate to just a 3-story building, and you got a fire alarm panel that's spitting out little information on an LCD screen. We need to get clear definition. We need to tell them where it is. We need to make the technician who's programming that know and understand, so that the building owner and the firefighters can understand where these alarms are coming from. So I just wanted to share that with you, just make you aware of, I guess, something that we're trying to improve. Yes?
Along these lines, there are a couple of projects that are being looked at right now by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST. Dick Bukowski is the gentleman there that's working on it. And one would be called call it a firefighter's interface panel. And this is not to take anything away from a fire alarm manufacturer that could design their own panel, but there would be some sort of a standard interface to the firefighters with some standard kinds of icons. That's really, I'll call it the low end, or the simple project. The other project you're looking at is what you could refer to as a sensor-rich building, which could have more heat sensors, which could have door switches on fire doors, so the firefighters would know if those doors were open or closed, and could even end up being with a RF interface graphic panel that could give firefighters more of a graphic image of where the fire was in the building, and they're going to build in a fire modeling program into this also. So you could get some idea of possible fire growth scenarios. So these are a couple projects, don't hold your breath, maybe it's 2010 or something, but NIST has been out interviewing firefighters to try and get their input into what kind of an interface would they like to see and how they would like to have it operated. So there's something being done at NIST on this right now.
And I know that you talk to the responding crews who go to the downtown districts, Minneapolis and St. Paul, they make it a practice to hit every single building so they can locate where those fire command rooms are and know the type of equipment that's inside those rooms. But if you go into some of these fire command centers that he was talking about, you walk in, you could have 10 panels in there. And they're all flashing little LEDs, and they're all beeping, and they're all tweaking. And, like you said, if you're responding to a fire and your adrenaline is really pumping, the last thing you want to do is just start trying to interpret which panel to look at and try to understand where that alarm is coming from. So that's something else that we're trying to address there.
One other thing, and I know, LVC and maybe some of the other manufacturers have it too, is the new improved and more information dialer, the serial DAC with an addressable system. So when that goes out, if these high-rises have, hopefully have a monitoring service, the central station that's getting the signal can give that specific information to the fire department.
They'd have the early notification of where that actually...
Exactly. They know instead of just an alarm or a trouble signal from the communicator panel, that the dialer, it tells them what smoke detector on what floor. So, I mean, I see that as a huge advantage, for, the Phoenix Fire Department, Minneapolis Fire Department, St. Paul, wherever, that, we're providing more of those type of dialers on our addressable systems, because we can give more specific information to the firefighters.
Anything that'll tell the responding crew where that alarm is and what type of alarm it is, because if he knows where it is and he knows it's a water flow, then he knows he's got a real serious problem.
Right.
That's when he crank it to top one priority. If it's an alarm, if it's a smoke detector, then all of a sudden their interest is there.
Right.
The response time.
They know where it is before they get there. That's great.
If you're looking at the human interface from a firefighter standpoint and from the scientist standpoint, all of this information is wonderful, but the captain spoke clearly that it's got to be in a simplified form. And I can tell you that trying to remember
where on the 7th floor the alarm is going off without a map, identifying the location that I could have in my hand when I was a firefighter, and move through the building, all of this is for naught. The fire modeling that Bukowski did, it sounds great, but it's still not giving the hardcore, simplified, easy to read, building block information to the firefighter. And everything else may sound really good and warm and fuzzy to us. The reality is that's ultimately what needs to go into their hand to take them through the building. And anything less than that.
I'm going to turn it over to Bob Hirsch, and he's going to go through a real quick presentation on FAA.
When Tom asked me to talk about this, that was kind of interesting. Because I'm here to talk to a group of professionals about another organization. You're thinking, what do we need another organization? Where do we get one? And so I thought about how I was going to present this, and I thought the easiest way to do it is get a slide presentation from somebody else. Okay. And so, then the more I thought of it, I thought, what is our function as fire alarm installers, as sprinkler contractors, as insurance people, as specifiers, engineers? What's our function when we think about fire alarm and sprinkler system? If we do our job wrong, people die. Buildings just get destroyed, computers are trashed, but we can't make a mistake. A mechanic makes a mistake in your car. You complain about it, but you get it fixed by somebody else. We make a mistake, people die. I mean, it's real simple. So, when I came in the industry in 1971, went to work for a little company called AUT. And they taught me everything there was to know. And I mean, I was a resident expert. Within 5 years, I knew more than everybody, because that's the way they presented it. And they hammered that into your head. That what you're doing is you're protecting somebody's life. And so I left AUT back in '87 and went to work for LBC. But one thing that I talk about with people I train and people I hire is that if you're done with a building and you're ready to call it quits and give it to the owner, and you finished your fire alarm system, then bring your family in. Put them to sleep, put your 2-year-old child down to sleep, and the farthest corner of the building, start building that fire. If you're okay with that, and they can get out, then okay, you did a pretty good job. If they can't get out, or you're worried about, then you better go back to work. So, how do we fix this? We take organizations such as yourself, and get a group of professionals around, and you banter ideas, you change codes, you change the way you do things, and you get an organization such as the Automatic Fire Alarm Association. And you influence how the fire alarm industry works. So, what I want to talk to you about tonight is the AFAA. It's a national organization. Start the slideshow, Bob. Now, it's a national organization, Automatic Fire Alarm Association. It was formed in 1953. It's the only national trade association exclusively dedicated to representing the automatic fire detection and fire alarm systems. Membership is made up of all segments of the industry: manufacturers, distributors, state and regional associations, users, code officials, engineers. In your case, fire protection engineers. This is a good organization to belong to. About 1,000 members nationally. This slide's about a year old. So those numbers are growing. States, now Minnesota's in the formation stage, has been for about 6 months. People like the Simplex people are interested in it. Honeywell people, low voltage contractors. I'm sure Tom will join tonight probably. There's a group of people. We're going to have a meeting on May 9th, and probably about 50, 60 responses already, just as an informational sign me up type meeting. The association is committed to influencing codes and standards at all levels to make buildings safer through the proper application of automatic fire detection and fire alarm systems, with a key emphasis on proper. Through our participation in the code making process, we have been able to influence the requirements for the audibility of fire alarm systems, alarm verification for smoke detectors so you don't have the false alarms, maintenance and testing of systems, and 100% acceptance testing at the time of original installation. When you talk about a system that went off from lightning, et cetera, nobody did anything about it, a lot of those problems can be resolved by proper testing and maintenance of the system. When you hand over a system, when you hand over a sprinkler system, you test it. Make sure you do your standard tests, you do all your pressure tests, to make sure it works. There's nothing leaking and the system works. When a fire alarm, make sure everything works. The thrust is now to commission a system. Test each and every single detector, pre-test it, then test it again, and you document it, and then you bring in the AHJ. And Mashad Cooley-Erickson said, after you do all that, and you give the building over, before you do that, they kind of want to go through and do it again. So we test the hell out of it. The major thrust is to ensure that the new ICC International Code Council International Building and Fire Code is due to be published in the year 2000, and that's kind of wrong. Contain the best of requirements for automatic fire detection and fire alarm systems currently found in 3 model building and fire codes that will replace. We are participating in various meetings of the ICC subcommittees who have the responsibility for the fire safety requirements will appear in drafts of each code. The draft on this code is out. The fire alarm is trying to do, the fire alarm ministry is trying to do, is make an international code similar to what the mechanical code is, so that it's more performance-based code rather than these other rules and stuff. We're on technical committees, NFPA 72, which deals with fire alarm systems. NFPA 101 Life Safety Codes, which addresses individual occupancies, what's required on an occupancy basis, rather than just if there's a fire alarm, that's what you have to do. If it's a prison, here's what you have to do. If it's a new nursing home, it's an existing nursing home. Educate all levels of the industry on how to properly apply, install, and maintain systems. And I know that your organization has or is getting together with AFA nationally to provide some training seminars. I heard that last month. That's good. The association conducts 4 levels of seminars nationwide. Fire alarm system testing and inspection seminar. It's a basic application course, describes the requirements for fire alarm system tests and inspections, and how to correctly perform these tests and visual inspections to meet the requirements of the 1999 NFPA 72 National Fire Alarm Code and the 1999 NFPA 70 National Electrical Code. The 1999 NFPA 72 has not been adopted by Minnesota yet. The electrical code is adopted every 3 years as it comes out. So we're still living on 1996 NFPA 72. A lot of the fire marshals, a lot of the firefighters, a lot of the fire services go to this class. The Automatic Fire Detection and Fire Alarm Systems Seminar. It's a basic 2-day fire alarm seminar for building and fire inspectors involved in acceptance testing and our plan review. New installers, sales personnel, service technicians, and anyone responsible for automatic fire detection and fire alarm systems. It includes segments on system fundamentals, initiation devices, notification appliances, all the other things that have to do with fire alarm. The Intermediate NICET 2 seminar is a 3-day seminar in layout. And basically this seminar will prepare someone to take the NICET Level 2 exam in fire alarm and hopefully pass it. The Advanced Fire Alarm Seminar is a 3-day seminar for PEs who design fire alarm systems and individuals interested in testing for NICET Level 3 and 4. NICET Level 3 and 4 in fire alarm systems talks more about the design and the concepts, stack effects, burn ratios, smoke movement. It's more into the design stage rather than here's a smoke detector, here's how we wire it, here's Ohm's law. So level 4 is quite, all the NICET levels are quite difficult to pass, and you guys are familiar with NICET because Sprinkler has NICET certification also. So we have training. 101 seminars conducted in the last 12 months in 31 states, Washington, D.C. 22 fire alarm system testing and inspection seminars. 35 two-day automatic fire alarm detection and fire alarm system seminars. 38 three-day intermediate NICET 2 seminars. AFAA is very, very big on NICET. If you look at the AFA website, there's a hot link right into NICET. Evaluations received on our seminars indicate 98 to 90% of the attendees would recommend to others and receive fair treatment for their money, fair value for the money spent and information received. I've been to 3 of the seminars myself. I find them very, very interesting. Supporting and developing research to improve life safety in America. Promoting the role of the industry in meeting the public need for life safety. Providing a communication network to quickly and accurately identify industry problems, exchange ideas and information or solutions, and organize corrective programs. The biggest help that any industry has is when people can sit down and talk to each other. And I did it this way, how did that work? Don't do it this way, we found this, etc., etc. Passing information is good. These are levels of NICET certification. I believe there's more than one NICET level 4 person in the room. Publications and forms. NEMA guides come out of AFAA and manuals. Inspection and testing forms. There's a 4-page form that we use as a standard to give to the fire departments and the owners and the engineers that we did inspect and test the system. Record of completion, again, a 4-page form. Benefits include training and education, actually, newsletters, annual meetings, usually in Las Vegas, AFAA list server. There's a pretty good site on the that will come to you over here on the internet. It's a lively discussion. They have a pretty good web page, a lot of information on it. There's their address. Networking. Anytime you get an organization of professionals, networking is the primary purpose to get together. Liaison with other associations, such as yourself. Promulgation of model building codes and NFPA codes and standards. If we want the system to work properly, then let's be instrumental and let's write the codes. Let's have some input. Technical services, and that's it. So, a real brief, hurried outline of the AFAA Minnesota chapter will start. We've got some people very interested in it. We're going to get going. We expect numbers, high numbers. We'll have quarterly meetings. Right now, we've got a group of people that are acting as people on the board, get it rolling. Elections hopefully will be in January. So I would encourage everyone, there is a May 9th meeting that we will provide lunch. It's 11 to 1, and it's at Thunderbird. It's at Thunderbird. I have information sheets out on the table where we came in, and also if you guys are so moved, it's such a good job, you can also fill out the application and give me a check, and then you don't have to go to a meeting. So, are there any questions? Yes, sir.
Is this organization also going to be looking at like ways of promoting standardization, type the way we're talking about here too for different panels? And
That's the main thrust. To get standardization, what we have to do is direct the BOCA and the UBC and all the other building codes to come into one code, so that, and base it on a performance code. That way, you're not going to have the southern states doing something differently from the northern states, not because it's a different environment, just because somebody else is writing the code. So that's one of the main thrusts of this organization. The other thrust on that line is to make sure that the fire services across the state, we'll educate the fire services till doomsday. I mean, we'd love to. We'd go there 5 days a week if we had to. Because we want them to make sure that they understand how the fire systems work. We don't want another tape like this tape where the guy says, well, I don't want a computer, I don't want B2. Well, we want them to understand what they're doing so there isn't a B2. It's a smoke detector in the corridor, the lobby, next to the elevator, 40 feet down from room 202. I mean, that's the kind of mentality they have to get. So standardization will make it work. Yes, sir.
I was looking at your duty schedule, it seemed awful high. This organization is like, are you eliminating maybe some of the fire officials?
Well,
Officials that can't afford to go into it?
we're, like I said, we're still in the infancy stage locally. The reason the dues are so high, we have to pay the national out of the dues we get from the local. So it supports both the local and the national. The advantage to the dues high, we have made some allowances for fire officials and government people when we've reduced the rate, and that will come out in the bylaws because we want those people in. The advantage of the dues is that, say you pay $200 a year, if you go to 2 seminars, you've saved the $200 because the seminars are typically about half price for members. So that's justification. Anyone else?
I'll just comment on the national organization. I've worked with them. I was recently on the AFA Board of Directors. Was recently chair of the NEMA signaling section, and we always invited Larry Neibauer or anybody else from AFAA. So I've watched the AFAA leadership work closely with members from SFPE, from NEMA, with NFPA, and I've watched them operate at code hearings. And this last go-around on the ICC, the AFAA and the NEMA, I'll call it Building Codes Committee, worked together, and in my opinion, were extremely successful in terms of firearm systems, in terms of what got written into the fire code. So they have been extremely effective, and I plan on being part of the organization.
Good, good.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you.
Before anybody takes off, I have a couple of other quick announcements on here. If you already have not given your business card or email address to Mark Connor, please do so as you leave the meeting tonight. Mark, where are you? Give it to me, please, before you leave, because our goal is by this fall, when the new season starts out, is to have everybody on email, so we can virtually eliminate the mailings. If you do insist on being on the mailing list, please let us know that too, when we're trying to get everybody on the list. I heard mention about FAA websites. Since Ken didn't give me a brief description of our new website, I'm going to let Ken explain our local chapter. This is the Fire Protection Council. We now have a website that Ken helped establish. I just want to take a real quick minute to describe it and express various links that we may have to it, and also our intentions, or as you would like your organization or your company for a specific reason to be a link that's on this website. Please let Ken know. So Ken, just real quick, want to explain what they've done?
I just created a basic page that I just opened the feedback on what should be on there. I put the minutes, or I put the meeting notices on there. It's mnsfpe.org. Call me up with comments.
Yeah, like I said, if you have any specific announcements that you want to get in the newsletters, or if you have any seminars or any other information that would benefit our local chapter, either through our webpage or you can contact us and strike directly. Ken will get it on one way, shape, or form. We're starting to get into the 21st century ourselves. Granted, the costs for the services was very small. I was surprised how small it was to get this started. How much was it?
It's $30 for 2 years to license the name. It's on a free web server.
It's relatively cheap, and it's something that probably should have done a while back, but I guess it got to the point where somebody like Kent took the initiative and got the ball rolling. So more and more we're getting to the computer age, and we're getting as much information as we can on this website. We got some websites and links there to it. So if you have any other questions about that, you can see myself or you can see Kent on that. We only have one more program left for this season before we start up again in September. And that will be next month. And found the information on it. Gene Enthoff, Director of National Codes for NFSA, will be speaking to our chapter. This will be on, now this is Monday, the 21st? 22nd? Okay. Which is, we've generally never had a meeting on a Monday before, but that was the only day that Gene could make it into town. Plus, we didn't want to get too close to Memorial Day weekend. A lot of people travel that time, schools are out, the holidays, graduations, etc. So it's going to be Monday the 22nd. Flyers will be out on that within the next week. It'll be on the website shortly, so there'll be more information on it. And Gene's program is going to be on the new international building codes. We'll highlight sprinkler advantages in the 2000 edition, as well as some of the results of the hearings in Birmingham, Alabama for the 2001 edition. Gene will get more into that for the next month's meeting, and then that will be May 22nd. After that, we won't be meeting again until the last Wednesday of September. And at that time, next month, the last time, I will be addressing our local chapter as president. My 3-year term ends. We're still soliciting and looking for a new chapter president and a new chapter vice president. So if you're interested, or anybody you know may be interested in becoming chapter president or vice president, let's get on a resume. And also, as far as contacts in the industry goes, I'll always get your foot in a few doors. So if you or somebody who's interested in our chapter becoming an officer, please let me or other officers know. We'll be meeting sometime next month to discuss that, chapter officers, and also we'll be meeting next month to discuss the upcoming seminars for next year. So just pass that on to you, so think about it. With that, like I said, we won't be again until next month, so everybody have a fire safe one. See you then.
Yeah, I don't know, Bill.
You get your car, I'm gonna go bring it.